Good morning, everyone. Continuing our discussion, now we will look into the applications of flow cytometry. The flow cytometry is used for number one, phenotypic characterization of blood cells. Number two, measurement of apoptosis markers. Under this, we have the cell viability, detection of plasma membrane changes, detection of active caspase-3 activity, detection of mitochondrial proteins, and DNA fragmentation. And number three, intracellular cytokine detection. So these are some of the hand-picked applications of the flow cytometry. To begin with, how the flow cytometry is used for the phenotypic characterization of the blood cells. I have used this word immunophenotyping or the phenotypic characterization of cells is about the identification and quantification of a specific cell group in the mixed population. So how do you identify and quantify? So we can use the flow cytometry. As an example, it's about the immune cells of the blood. The specific cell surface membrane proteins, which are known as the markers, they can be detected using the antibodies. And these specific antigens can be expressed on more than one cell type. So what is known about the cell surface membrane proteins is that the specific surface membrane proteins, that is, it is cell specific. So these are known as the markers, and these specific antigens, they can be expressed on more than one cell type. So therefore the immunophenotyping of the cells can be accomplished by staining of a single cell simultaneously with two or more antibodies. And measurement of apoptosis markers is another important application. Rapid and quantitative measurement of apoptotic cells can be done by using the flow cytometry. So you can rapidly and quantitatively measure the apoptotic cells with the help of the flow cytometry. The methods for the detection of cells that are undergoing apoptosis should detect the apoptotic properties of cells rapidly and allow them to keep their natural state in order to obtain the most reliable results. And there are several different flow cytometric methods for the assessment of apoptosis in cells that have been described in various literatures. So I have picked few of them. To begin with, it is about the cell viability. The measurement of cell viability plays an important role in all kinds of cells. So for any cell science research, measurement of cell viability is a important parameter, or it plays an important role in all kinds of cells. And viability analysis provides information about the live or the viable cells, and it differentiates between the dead cells or the non-viable cells. So that is the viability analysis or the assay. That means it provides information about how many cells are viable and how many cells are non-viable. And the non-viable cells in any given samples, so they can non-specifically bind to the antibodies, resulting in false positives. So the outcome is inaccurate result. Right. So that is where the flow cytometry comes into. The detection of cell viability by flow cytometry, it is based on a simple but a powerful principle, that is the viable cells or the viability of cells. It can be easily determined in flow cytometry by adding one of the DNA binding dyes. So the concentration of the dye will be known to you. Now this will determine live and dead cells. So only the cells which are capable enough to take up the dye, they will be segregated from the cells which do not take up the dye. So this is very specific when compared to any of the other viability assay, because in other viability analysis or the assay, even the non-viable cells, they non-specifically bind to the antibodies, that results in inaccurate or the false positives. So flow cytometry is another important technique where you can easily differentiate between the viable cells and the dead cells, because you are using a specific DNA binding dye at a relatively low concentration, so that you don't use the dye at very high concentrations. The example for the dye which is used is the 7-amino actinomycin, that is abbreviated as 7-AAD, 7-amino actinomycin D. And also we have the DAPI. So that is most commonly, you can find this DAPI even in the laboratories. Right. So the discrimination between live and dead cells in flow cytometric analysis can be carried out based on the usage of these different fluorochromes, such as 7-amino actinomycin D and DAPI. So this is one way, and it is more specific and the results are accurate. Next we have the detection of plasma membrane changes, another important apoptosis marker. Now we know that apoptosis is characterized by a variety of molecular and morphological changes. So this is with respect to the cells. So you find the molecular changes as well as morphological changes. And one of the earliest events in an apoptotic cascade is the alteration in the plasma membrane. So that is the reason why it forms as a apoptotic marker. Now what happens in the alteration process of the plasma membrane? The membrane phosphatidylserine is translocated from the inner to the outer leaflet, but it will not affect the plasma membrane integrity. So this leads to detect the culmination of apoptosis by the loss of plasma membrane integrity. Right. So that is the reason why the flow cytometry can be used to detect any changes associated with plasma membrane. Next we have the detection of active caspase 3 activity. Another molecular hallmark of apoptosis is the activation of caspases. Now we know that the caspases are the inactive enzymes and they must become active during the process of apoptosis only. So one of the effector caspases activated at the late apoptotic stage is the caspase 3. So the active, once the active caspase 3 is there, then it initiates a series of events that ultimately kill or destroy a cell. So the active caspase 3 can be detected and it can be easily analyzed by flow cytometry. Then the flow cytometry is also used for detection of mitochondrial proteins, another segment of apoptotic markers. The BCL2 is a human proto-oncogene which is located in the membranes of endoplasmic reticulum, nuclear envelope, and also in the outer membrane of the mitochondria. Right. So this BCL2, which is a proto-oncogene, human proto-oncogene, it is found to be in endoplasmic reticulum, nuclear envelope, and also in the outer membrane of the mitochondria. Now this BCL2, several studies have demonstrated that BCL2 is anti-apoptotic intracellular protein, and the decreased level of BCL2 indicates the progression of apoptosis. So how do you do or detect any changes associated with BCL2 activity? So in order to detect the BCL2 activity, the cells are fixed and then they are permeabilized. Then the fluorescence conjugated BCL2 antibody is added into cells and then it is analyzed by flow cytometry. So decreased BCL2 level indicates progression of apoptosis. That's the reason why it is considered as an apoptotic marker. Next, we have the DNA fragmentation. The programmed cell death or the apoptosis is accompanied by degradation of the chromosomal DNA. So technically, this is supposed to be the easiest characteristic to detect any loss of DNA from permeabilized cells due to the DNA fragmentation. And after permeabilization, the fragmented 182, the standard 182 base pair DNA multimers, they are leaked out of the cell. The advantage of this method is it is very fast, inexpensive and simple. Okay. Normally, the DNA fragmentation is assessed by looking into the 182 base pair DNA multimers which come out of the cell, and the technique is very fast, inexpensive and simple. And it detects cumulative apoptosis and is applicable to most cell types, no doubt about it. So you cannot differentiate the target where the apoptosis is actually happening. So it is a technique where it detects the cumulative apoptosis, the overall apoptosis. So an alternative method to detect the DNA fragmentation by flow cytometry involves the identification of the nicks or the strand breaks using the tunnel technique. So the tunnel, that is the terminal deoxynucleotidyl transferase nick end labeling. Now this technique is used for detection and quantification of the apoptosis at the single cell level based on labeling of DNA strand breaks. The other assays which are used for the DNA fragmentation studies, that is all about the detection of cumulative apoptosis. But the tunneling technique based assay is capable enough to detect and quantify the apoptosis at the single cell level which is based on labeling of DNA strand breaks. So the cells or the individual cells, they are visualized by flow cytometry. Right. Next, we have the intracellular cytokine detection. To detect the intracellular cytokines, what is done is the cells are cultured, and then the cultured cells are washed and labeled with cell surface markers, especially for the T cells. And following washing, the cells are fixed and they are permeabilized for intracellular staining of the cytokines. Then after fixation and permeabilization, the fluorescence conjugated antibody for a target molecule is added to the cells, and finally the labeled cells, they are processed for analysis by flow cytometry. So it is a simple approach to detect the intracellular cytokine levels. So finally, in conclusion, the flow cytometry is supposed to be the most sorted or the most powerful technique, and it can be used for the analysis of different types of samples in a short period of time. So that is most important one. So the time you spend on analysis of various kinds of samples is very less. That's the reason why the flow cytometry is supposed to be the most powerful technique, right? So with that conclusion, we will move on to another important technique in the course Analytical Biochemistry 2, that is the nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. The NMR spectroscopy is an effective characterization tool, right? So the previous one was detection and quantification tool, that is flow cytometry. Now we are going to study about a spectroscopy technique, that is nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy technique, which is an effective characterization technique. So that you should understand the difference. Earlier about flow cytometry, we discussed about detection and quantification. Now we are trying to understand the characterization. So which is the most effective tool is, then the name is always the NMR. So this is an effective characterization technique or tool which is used for examining the electronic structure of a molecule and properties of various chemical species. So essentially we are trying to characterize here. And nowadays it is also widely used in the characterization of the nanomaterials too. So this is based on the absorption of electromagnetic radiation in the RF region, that is the radio frequency region. And the frequencies of NMR transitions are typically in the range of 10 to 1000 megahertz. And the nuclei of atoms, they are proved by this radiation. So the nuclei of atoms show a change in energy state when an analyte is placed in an intense magnetic field. So the fundamental idea behind the NMR spectroscopy is based on the atom. Now we know that the atom is defined as a building block of any material or the matter, which consists of fundamental particles, that is electrons, protons and neutrons. So the fundamental idea behind NMR spectroscopy is based on the atom, right? Now, to explain an atom, it is necessary to consider the quantum numbers which are often employed in determining the characteristics of an atom. What are those characteristics? Such as ionization, energy and atomic radius. and also the behavior of each electron within an atom. So it is necessary to consider the quantum numbers which are often employed in determining the characteristics of an atom and also the behavior of each electron within an atom. So quantum number consideration is very, very important. Now the quantum numbers of an electron in an atom, they are described by Schrodinger's wave function. So the quantum numbers provide information about the electronic configuration of an atom and the possible location of the atom's electron. And we know that each electron has a unique set of 4 quantum numbers. Consequently, the quantum numbers hold the detailed information related to the specific shells, subshells, orbital and spin of an electron in an atom. Right. The principal quantum number, which is represented by the n symbol, is a positive integer because the atom would not exist with 0 or negative energy levels or the principal shells. Right. The orbital angular momentum quantum number, which is represented by the symbol L, gives information on the shape of the orbital and the number of angular nodes. Then we have the magnetic quantum number, which is represented by the M, and the electron spin quantum number, which is represented by S. Right. So in brief, the quantum number or the numbers gives the following information. What are those information? The principal quantum number is related to the electron shell, size of the orbital and energy state. So larger n means larger size of the orbital. So higher n value suggests a higher energy state. Say for example, if n equals 0, shows the lowest energy state and the innermost shell. If the energy of the electron is increased by an incident energy, could be photon or energetic electrons, then the electron jumps to a higher shell or energy state, tends to increase the principal quantum number. So the term orbital quantum refers, or the angular quantum refers to a specific subshell which is characterized by the letter S, P, D or the F. And the orbital angular momentum quantum number is likely to be dependent on the principal quantum number n, and the orbital angular momentum quantum can be written which falls within the range 0 to n minus 1. And next, the magnetic quantum, that is M. This can describe the shape of an orbital, the angular distribution and the number of angular nodes. Right. So for a given value of the angular momentum quantum number L, we can estimate the magnetic quantum M by applying the equation, that is 2L plus 1. So it is important to consider that the magnetic quantum number can be minus L2 plus L. Now this defines the number of orbitals and orbital orientation within the subshell. Last, we have the electron spin quantum number. It is one of the most important quantum numbers which is used in NMR analysis, and it does not depend on the other quantum numbers. And how do you define this? It defines the direction of an electron spin. The direction of electron spin refers to an upward spin, that is plus 1 by 2, or a downward spin, that is minus 1 by 2. Right. So with this background, I'll stop my discussion over here. We can continue our discussion in the next session. Thank you very much.